The U.S. Food and Drug Administration recently approved for the first time a biopharmaceutical drug from China. Toripalimab was the first in a series of other Chinese cancer medicines approved by the FDA. But the drugs will sell at a significantly higher price than what they're going for in China. Here to explain why and to tell us more about these drugs is our post-China science reporter, Victoria Bella.
So recently, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved a series of Chinese cancer drugs. The first was in late October, and it was the first innovative biopharmaceutical to be produced in China that was ever approved in the U.S., and it's called Toripalimab. It was approved to treat nasopharyngeal carcinoma, which is a cancer of the nose and throat, and it was developed by the Shanghai-based Dringshi Biosciences. Next up, in the beginning of November, was fruquintinib, which is a drug that was approved to treat colorectal cancer, specifically metastatic colorectal cancer. So began in the colon or rectum and has progressed to other locations, and it was developed by the Chinese company HUTCHMED. And the last one is an injection that was approved to specifically treat a chemotherapy-induced condition called neutropenia, which is low levels of a specific type of white blood cell. And it was approved in mid-November, and it was developed by the company Evive Biotech, which is a subsidiary of the Chinese pharmaceutical company Yifan Pharmaceuticals.
Right, so they were approved almost one after the other. What do you think is behind this?
Yeah, so the FDA doesn't give specific reasons for the approval besides the more clinical medical reasons as to why it was approved, but there's a few clues. So first of all, the COVID-19 pandemic. Toripalimab was previously actually rejected by the FDA last year, and they stated at the time that it was because the FDA was unable to come to China to do on-site clinical visits. And so there's a good chance that other drugs have been delayed because of an inability for the FDA to actually come to China. But now that they can come again, that the pandemic is over, we might see more drug approvals. The next is that the US is currently still facing an ongoing shortage of cancer drugs. Most of the drugs that they're facing a shortage of are more basic chemotherapy drugs, but nonetheless, they've been importing them from China. And these are Chinese drugs that are not FDA approved, but that match up with the ones that they're having a shortage of in the US. So the thought is possibly these are other drugs that China, that the US doesn't have enough of, that they're trying to import. And the last reason could be that there are just no US equivalents for the drugs. For example, Toripalimab was the first approved treatment specifically for nasopharyngeal carcinoma. And so the US might just not have any equivalents that are treated, that are specific for certain cancers. So China could be sort of meeting an unmet demand.
But that type of cancer, I guess, is less prevalent in the US compared to Asia. So, but however, the second drug would potentially would have a lot of demand.
Yeah, so for Toripalimab and nasopharyngeal carcinoma, that's a cancer that's more common in the south of China and Hong Kong. But for colorectal cancer, it's actually the third most common cancer in the world. And in the US, it's very common. It's a leading cause of cancer-related deaths. So this drug, fruquintinib, specifically could have a lot of patients in the US.
Right. So let's talk pricing. What's the market price expected to be in the States? How much will these go for in the States?
So for a single dose vial of Toripalimab, it's going to go for about $8,800 US, which is 31 times more expensive than it is priced in China. And for fruquintinib, it's going to go for $25,000 for a 21 pill box for 5 milligrams, which is about 24 times more expensive than it is in China.
And how are they able to charge so much more in the States than compared to China?
So they're honestly matching the market in the US. In the US, there's no agency that negotiates with drug companies to lower prices. So for China, these are not the wholesale prices that we're comparing, but rather these are prices set based on enrollment into the national insurance system, which about 95% of Chinese people are enrolled into, meaning most people are going to have access to these cheaper prices in China. But in the US, it's highly dependent on your insurance, whether your insurance covers it. So it's going to depend. But these are wholesale prices for the US, so there's a chance that people are going to be paying actually less for them.
So having said that, even though it's triple more than many times more, how does that compare to the other Western drugs that does the same or similar things?
So Toripalimab is still going to be 20% cheaper than the main competitor on the US market, Keytruda, which is another PD-1 antibody drug, and PD-1 is an immune inhibitor. So yeah, it's still going to be priced lower than its main competitor on the US market, which means means that it has a good chance of being used a lot. There's a good chance that people are going to adopt it and start using it. And generally, a few companies have done so, where when they get FDA approval, Chinese companies, they may price the drugs a little bit lower, just a little bit under the market value in the US. And one of the main reasons the prices in the US are so high is because essentially drug companies will charge what the market can bear. A research team last year did a study and showed that the drug prices are largely dependent on how much drug companies can really charge in the market and how much people will pay. And so because it's not negotiated by any agency in the US, the prices are a little bit out of control if you compare them to some other countries.
So it's very much a supply and demand. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks so much, Victoria, for that. Very interesting.
Thank you very much for speaking with me today.